Hey, Montel Williams here. Look, I've got some incredible news to share with you. I want to tell you about my brand new book that's coming out that's called The Sailing of the Intrepid. Now, this book is more than just an historical account. It's a tribute to the brave men who served aboard the USS Intrepid and a celebration of their extraordinary legacy. Writing this book was such an incredible story, and I'm really thrilled to be able to share it with you. So don't wait to grab your little piece of history. The book is available right now to order. You can go to montelmedia.com, and you can even get a limited autograph signed copy. Now, thank you so much for your support. I can't wait for you to read this incredible story of the sailing of the Intrepid. I'll see you on the pages. Welcome back to Free Thinking with Montel. I'm your host, Montel Williams, and today we're diving into one of the most inspiring environmental success stories of our time. It's told in a remarkable new book called Sea Change, Unlikely Allies and the Success Story of Oceanic Proportions. Our guest today is Amanda Leland, Executive Director at Environmental Defense Fund and co-author of Sea Change. This book takes us on a journey through the incredible recovery of the Gulf's red snapper population, a comeback that seemed almost impossible just about a decade ago. It's a story of hope, resilience, and power of collaboration to solve even the toughest environmental challenges. Amanda, thank you so much for being a part of Free Thinking with Montel today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Look, your book is a breath of fresh air, or maybe I should say a splash of fresh water, in the world of environmental storytelling. Sea Change tells the story of how the Gulf's red snapper population made a miraculous comeback thanks to a revolutionary approach to conservation. Can you start by giving us number one, a little background on what inspired you to write the book? And before you even do that, tell us where the book is available. Where can people get it?
You can get it wherever books are sold. You can go to your local independent bookseller. You can go to any of the big ones online. You can go to Torrey House Press, which is the publisher of the book.
Okay, and so what inspired you to write this story?
Well, as you said, thank you for that lovely introduction. It's a book about hope, and I think we all need a little more hope in our lives these days. And we wanted to tell a story of progress, of success, of grit, of humans working together to solve problems together. And it kind of couldn't have come at a better time, I think. And it helps map a path by which we can see how recovery in environmental issues can actually happen.
I mean, I just listen to the news every now and then, and you hear that, I mean, from a standpoint of species, we seem to be in this problem, a catastrophic problem with this, with many species across, our environment here in the United States and here in North America. This is something that could probably be shared with other issues, or no, is this basically how to solve a fish problem?
This is a story about fish, but it's really a story about hope, and it's a story that can transcend fish and into all kinds of, as you said, wildlife, species conservation needs and opportunities, but broader environmental issues too: water, forests, climate change, the fundamentals of working together with unlikely allies and listening to the people you disagree with, which is what this book tells the history of around fish. And fishermen in particular, it can be applied in all kinds of areas where we have a lot of opportunity and a lot of need to make a difference in the world.
Yeah, it's about people, communities, and the systems we rely on. Tell us a little bit more about Mr. Buddy. Is his name Guindon? He's such a
Guindon.
Guindon. He's such a central figure in the book.
Yeah, so the story centers around this fisherman named Buddy Guindon, who lives in Galveston, Texas. And he is a very unlikely hero, but he is the hero of the story. The story takes you back 20-ish years ago, and red snapper, which is a very iconic, somewhat famous fish in the Gulf. A lot of people love to go out and catch red snapper and eat red snapper, but it was collapsing. There were fewer and fewer and fewer red snapper in the Gulf, and Buddy was the biggest, most effective fisherman in the Gulf catching red snapper. So he had a lot at stake as the fishery was collapsing. And Buddy didn't want change. And he felt like it could actually make things harder for him. And in the history of working in the fishing world, every time an environmentalist like me talked to a person like him, it meant there would be less fish to catch because there would be more restrictions, basically. And so he fought the change that ultimately protects the fish stock and improves the fishery and the health of the fishery. But he becomes the biggest champion of it because it works for him. And almost immediately, actually, it works for him. In the world of fishing, the old way of management changed to a new way of management. And in that new way, in 3 months' time, he was actually making twice as much money, catching half as many fish. And the reason he needed to catch half as many fish is because that allowed the fish population to rebound. And now there are so many more red snapper in the Gulf. And he's a champion who talks to other fishermen about how this can be a successful approach in their fishery. He started with 5 guys on a boat, wondering if they'd have jobs tomorrow, and he employs now more than 240 people, including his 4 sons. So he goes from opponent to champion and to ambassador for what good can look like. It's a very powerful way to tell the story through the eyes of this regular guy.
And for decades, overfishing seemed like an inevitable tragedy. What do you think shifted the narrative and made the change really possible? Was it just Buddy, or was it the fact that people started to recognize that these systems that you were helping them put in place would improve their outcomes?
Number 2, full on. Buddy is a great way to tell the story, but there's a lot of other buddies out there. There's hundreds of them. Fundamentally, the solutions that last and that are effective are the ones that are going to help people in their lives pretty quickly. And I think our sector in the environmental world, we sometimes think we should ask people to take pain today for some future benefit that may happen. But what this story shows is that if we make a change and it almost immediately improves their business or their life or their community or their family, any of those things, it's going to last and it's going to make a real difference. And so that's really the learning, is the old management system didn't put fishermen at the center of the solution. And the new management system tied their economic health to the improvement in the population of the fish in the Gulf. So those two things worked together. As the fish populations went up, they made more money. And so it works.
It's incredible how a shift in perspective can lead to such a transformative change. And it sounds like this model, catch shares, has an application far, far beyond just the Gulf.
Yes. So thank you for using the word catch shares and identifying what the solution is. It does have application. So as much as this story played out in the Gulf and Buddy and Galveston and the fishermen across the Gulf, another really great example is along the west coast of the United States, which went through a similar reform. And it's one of the biggest fisheries in the U.S. And that went from being declared a disaster by the federal government to now being certified as sustainable by the top sort of regulator around what sustainability looks like in fisheries. And fishermen are catching so many delicious fish that we can all eat and enjoy. It is a remarkable turnaround. So catch shares work in all kinds of contexts because it puts fishermen at the center of the solution and helps them benefit from recovery directly.
You know, that's such an important message. And I think it's one that we don't hear often enough. So many environmental stories focus on what's going wrong, but sea change is about what's going right. Explain that.
Well, it that was sort of purposeful in the writing of the story. We wanted to tell a hopeful success, and it really does. It's kind of different than most environmental books that you'll read, and I'm proud of that. But there are many other books that could be told, or this story could be told in lots of different places. It isn't just about fish. There's huge progress being made on water, on forests, on climate change, and I think we all would benefit by more of the stories that focus on what progress really looks like.
I mean, you literally brought together desperately different groups, from fishermen to scientists to policymakers, that all often don't see eye to eye. I mean, they all came together to make this happen, right?
They did. We spent a lot of time in the bars together. So one of the insights is you go to where the people are that you want to um, help them solve the problem, right? And so with the fishermen, we knew we needed to get the fishermen on side. They were the ones that had the power to make this situation better. And so we spent a lot of times hanging out where they were, which was the bars along the Gulf Coast. And a big part of that is the learning of we can find common ground when we lower our voices and we listen to the people we disagree with. It's really common that if you do that, you'll almost always find a path forward. And there are so many incredible opportunities to find those paths.
Now, the Texas Gulf was an incredible success story, but you mentioned California. Are there any other fish stocks that have rebounded over the last 20 years thanks to this program?
Yeah, so there are over 40 countries are adapting this approach. So it's happening all over the world. One of the stories that I love is in Belize. We worked with fishermen throughout Belize. It's a very different kind of system. It's a small scale coral reef ecosystem. People go out on their little tiny boat and they catch some fish and they bring it back. Sometimes they feed their families with it. And in that context, where this kind of solution was applied, there was in the first year a 60% reduction in illegal fishing. And illegal fishing is a big deal. That's an important part of what needs to be managed. And we saw immediate outcomes. And so those kinds of stories are happening all over the world.
And what are some of the biggest challenges of getting fishermen, scientists, and policymakers to at least sit down and trust each other? I mean, you mentioned going to the bars, but there must have been some other ways to get them to finally understand that they're all in this together.
Yeah, part of it. So this for us, this started when the fishery started to collapse in the United States. We traveled with a group of fishermen around the world to see what kind of solutions were working in other parts of the world because the US didn't have all the answers. And it was really helpful for us to figure out that this catch share model was a good thing to try. And then what we did together was fundamentally look at each fisherman's business and whether their business would be better off, whether they could earn more money over time under this model. And that was fundamentally what got everybody on the same page, was that tie between the recovery of the fish population and the improvement in their businesses and their livelihoods. And ultimately, those Gulf fishermen had to vote to approve the catch share program, and they voted by 80% twice. And I think about the world today, and I don't know when 80% of people agree on anything, honestly. But they voted together and they approved it because they thought it was going to help them earn more money.
I mean, that's a pretty powerful example of what can happen when you stop pointing fingers at each other and start working together. I love that this story isn't just about the Gulf. It's part of a larger movement to rethink how we manage our natural resources and how other countries can do the same. Can you share maybe a specific moment in the story where a surprising partnership made all the difference?
Well, one of the things that has really changed, and if you talk to the fishermen in Galveston, they'll say catchers was great from an economic standpoint. It was great from a fish resource perspective. But what it's really done is brought that community together. And in the Gulf, there are tensions between the commercial fishermen and the recreational fishermen. Everybody wants access to the fish, and in a dwindling scenario, there's fewer fish to be had. Everybody's going to fight over who gets access to those fish even more. And by recovering the fish population and by building a set of by enabling commercial fishermen to become conservation advocates, there's been a bringing together of recreational and commercial interests. And now the community works together across these different divides that have been going on for so long. So I think that's it was a surprise in the story that we didn't see coming, but it is one of the foundational changes for the better that has helped that community recover.
And, how do you think that these lessons can be applied to other environmental challenges like climate change and deforestation? I mean, how do catch a forest now? I mean, how do you apply this to, other areas of environmental challenge?
So again, there's a lot of opportunity. The way we think about forests in particular is that forests should be worth more alive than dead. And that is the tie between the economics and the people who live in the forest. And it also means legitimizing those people. A big part of the fishing story was legitimizing the commercial fishermen so that they could be the ones to steward the resource. And in places like the Amazon, there are indigenous peoples who are still fighting for their rights, and legitimizing them, giving them their rights, enabling them to have local control to protect their forests is really important. And at the same time, being able to bring in some economic incentives so that they actually can earn a living and improve their livelihoods, and get access to modern technology that will help them protect that forest even more. From a climate change perspective, a big piece of the puzzle, and where there's a ton of opportunity, is for communities to benefit from clean energy development and infrastructure. So if there's going to be a new solar site somewhere, the community right there should be able to get some of those benefits. Maybe it's going to help them with their schools or their hospitals or their roads, but economics really can play a big role here.
Well, but when you say climate change, you're talking about something that we've got multiple world leaders fighting the idea that it even is real. You have all these desperate groups that are out here trying to say there is no such thing as climate change. This is a cycle that the Earth goes through. Calm down. How do you convince people to stop for a second and look outside of their own little box?
It's a great question and one I think about a lot. I think part of it is telling stories of progress, honestly. And one of them that I think is super powerful is environmentalists partnering with oil and gas companies to reduce methane emissions. Methane is responsible for much of the warming we're experiencing today. It's super potent in the atmosphere. It's leaking from pipelines and from wells, and we can cap those leaks. We can reduce the climate impacts that we're feeling. So, working together, helping people see that there's actually progress being made, and it doesn't have to be this big sort of moralistic argument. It can actually be here's substantial steps being taken that are better for everyone. I think the more of those stories we can tell, I think the more progress we're going to see.
Are you finding that there's more interest in even listening to what you have to say? Because I mean, if you put that before this current White House, I'll guarantee you that they close the door in your face.
So thankfully there's more to the world than the current administration and their posture. And EDF, my organization, Environmental Defense Fund, is working really hard to protect the gains that have been made on climate and clean energy and public health in particular, over the last years. But there's also unstoppable momentum, in the states, in the regions. The progress is playing out kind of regardless. And so there's great progress in California in particular that is worth championing, as well as other states around the country. And the more we can sort of join the help enable those bright spots to work together, the more we're going to see the progress and that momentum continue.
Well, you've worked on ocean conservation globally. Are there any other countries or regions that are seeing similar success stories, that are really worth talking about?
Yeah,
What can we learn?
so yeah, there's, like I said, there's over 40 countries now adapting this approach, so it's sort of spreading on its own. One that's probably important to call out is Japan. A lot of people think about Japan as being a superpower fishing country, which it is. And in Japan, they revamped their law, some years ago, so to better enable these kinds of catch share solutions, better science, better management of the fisheries. And we're seeing real progress there. And if Japan takes a leadership role in Asia, we're going to see even more progress around, the Pacific, which is in a really big opportunity.
One more time, give out the stats. Where can people go to get the book? Send a name and where you go. Where can you get it? And is there, a online presence? Talk to me. Tell me. Tell our
Yeah,
listeners.
you can go to edf.org/sea change, which is, EDF's website, associated with the Sea Change book. You can get access to it there. And you can buy it at any bookseller. And And I'm Amanda Leland, and you can find me on Instagram or LinkedIn.
Okay, well, the book emphasizes the importance of aligning economic incentives with conservation goals. How do you think this approach is really, could be expanded to say other industries beyond fishing?
So, one of the greatest successes of aligning economics with environmental progress is one that we don't talk about really anymore. Again, a story that a problem that's been solved that's sort of flying below the radar now, which is acid rain. Do you remember the days of acid rain?
Oh, sure, it's been going on, it's still going on, but we just don't talk about it.
Well, actually, there's been huge progress. So sulfur dioxide was the big driver of acid rain, and then there was a shift in the law, and it fundamentally created incentives for power plants to reduce their sulfur dioxide emissions, which has now been up to over 90% reductions in the last 30-ish years. And when I was growing up in the northeastern part of the United States, all of the forests were falling apart. The forests were dying because of acid rain. We don't see that problem anymore. There's still some happening. It's not all solved. I definitely agree with you there. But there's been huge progress because when you align economics and environmental outcomes, you typically have irreversible momentum or lasting change that can really make a difference for people on the planet.
And what role do consumers play in supporting sustainable seafood? How can we make it easier for people to make, good and well-informed choices? And where do they get the information to do that? Especially when they go to the grocery store or in the restaurants, let's say. I mean, I can remember there was a time where people talked about Chilean sea bass and was almost an extinct species worldwide. Yet, you can go to fundraising dinners and they were still serving it. So, how do you get the consumer to play a part in this?
This is one that has gotten easier for the consumer and not harder. So today, 94% of US fish stocks are rebuilt or on their way. So if you're buying American fish, if you go to your local seafood provider, your fishmonger, and you buy local American seafood, you're making a very smart choice. You don't have to know all the things about the seafood the way you used to have to know them because the vast majority of fisheries in the US have been turned around. And that's a real success story. And there are fishermen now in some of these recovered fisheries that are that have more product than the market can buy. So the American consumer has a huge role in supporting these fishermen, these local coastal communities, and the success and progress that has been made on U.S. seafood. You can go to McDonald's and order a filet of fish sandwich and feel really good about that because it's coming from one of the most sustainable fisheries in the world in Alaska. So there's lots of opportunity for consumers to really make a difference.
I mean, in your experience, what are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about ocean conservation? And how do you, seem to get people informed and let them know a little bit more about it?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that people feel that fishermen themselves are the ones to blame for the problem of overfishing, and so inherently they shouldn't be the ones to help solve the problem. And the way we overcome that is by putting them in a driver's seat and enabling them to demonstrate how their business ties back to the resource. And I think overcoming that has that we have made real progress on that narrative. Fishermen now can be seen as environmental champions, and they should be because it was a very risky bet for them to take. But they're also now becoming the lead advocates about ocean science and the incredible need there and better management across a whole set of ocean issues because they have a vested stake in ensuring that the oceans are healthy and clean and thriving. And we're seeing how that plays out in lots of other areas.
I mean, Amanda, what inspired you to dedicate your career to ocean conservation? I mean, has your personal connection, to the sea shaped your work?
Well, I did grow up on the ocean. My grandfather taught me how to fish and how to captain a boat. And I remember a moment where I went swimming with a whole pod of humpback whales one time when we were far offshore. So those things definitely shaped who I am today. But there's a really, I think, important fundamental experience I had when I was a marine biology graduate student 20-ish years ago. And I had fishermen who worked on my research team. And what they would say to me is, if I don't catch the last fish, someone else will. And that stuck with me forever, because the only way is down in that reality. That statement is final. If I don't catch the last one, someone else will. There's no recovery in that statement ever. And so rather than being a scientist that wrote the epitaph on global fisheries because everything was collapsing all at once, I decided to dedicate my career to solving that problem and making progress and not having coastal communities in our oceans collapse at the same time. And I think we've done a remarkable amount, remarkable amount of progress making that happen.
Looking ahead, what gives you the most hope for the future of our oceans, and what are the next big challenges we need to tackle? Like, the huge, garbage gyres in the middle of the Pacific, and people think it's only in the Pacific. It's in the Atlantic. It's in the Indian Ocean. We have these huge, just almost continent size, trash. I don't know what you want to call them.
I
Trash
call it,
islands.
yeah, I call it Trashlandia, for lack of a better word. Trashlandia. So these are the gyres, the oceans, the way the oceans work. There are these big gyres that rotate around, and so every time trash leaks into the ocean, typically through the biggest rivers in the world, they move around the ocean system, and then they end up in a gyre, and it's like it just keeps there. It just keeps going. It's a huge challenge. And the way to solve that problem is in two directions. One is you got to stop it at the source. Trying to get the trash out of the gyre is never going to work because it just keeps coming in. You got to stop it in the rivers at the source. And that's really hard because the places where the trash is coming in, they don't have proper disposal. They don't have the financial support to deal with trash. So there's a reason why that's happening. But the other side of that equation is the material itself, right? So there's a lot of innovation, technological innovation that needs to play out to make plastics not be plastics and something that's biodegradable that can just biodegrade in the ocean. So that's important too. But probably the biggest challenge in the ocean isn't the plastics, it's climate change. The oceans have absorbed the vast majority of heat, and the vast majority of excess carbon dioxide from climate change. It's the great savior right now. It's the system that is helping us continue to live on a livable planet.
I
And
mean,
and
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You talk about, the way the oceans work. There's this big circular, pattern in all the oceans. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, the cold, the ice, when the ice melts, it, it goes deep down into, of course, what is it? Colder water is heavier than warmer water, so it sinks lower, and it helps to keep that convection going on. But now I've read multiple stories and reports about how that's starting to slow down all over the planet, but especially in the Atlantic. We could end up with a big cesspool in the Atlantic if that system crumbles. Are we still in dire straits, or are we, on the verge? What's going on there?
but I feel like you have your marine biology degree, so thank you. That's really incredible that you know all about the global conveyor belt of the ocean. Not many people do. The reality is that we are headed towards serious thresholds, ecosystem thresholds. One of like
And,
there's
and when, sorry, and when you
threat.
say that, I'm sorry, when you say that, can you explain to people that this isn't 100 years from now? This isn't 75 years from now. This is within the next 20 years. We could have a catastrophic breakdown, especially in the Atlantic Ocean, when it comes to this, convection kind of circulatory process. But go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Could you explain that? Make sure people understand this is dire. This is not something that we need to joke about, because if that stops, everything changes. Climate changes all up and down there. We look at hurricanes. We already seen hurricanes and tropical storms in the Atlantic are different than they were 10 years ago. They've all moved, north by about, I don't know, one latitudinal line and or one or two. So we can start seeing the type of tropical storms that we've seen in the Bahamas and in Florida, hitting Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, which could be catastrophic for a nation. But go ahead. I'm sorry. Could you paint the picture for us so people understand?
Well, yes, you're right. So in my lifetime, we are on a path currently where in my lifetime, the we will likely hit or very likely to hit thresholds that will fundamentally change how the planet operates. And that, to your point, it's about storms, it's about water, too much water, too little water. It's about the change in where species can live around the planet. We're already seeing a lot of these steps playing out. But it's important to know that that story doesn't have to be written for us. It really doesn't. We have the ability to change what's going on. One of them, and the two really incredibly powerful levers that we have to reduce climate change right now is reducing methane emissions, as I said earlier, which really is kind of there's a lot of reasons why it should happen. It even from an oil and gas company perspective, it's wasted product for them. So the economics are better for them to not have all these emissions coming out of pipelines and wells. Reducing methane emissions now is pulling the emergency brake on climate change. The other one that I mentioned earlier is deforestation. Reducing deforestation, stopping deforestation is the other thing we can do right now that will have an outsized impact on that future 10, 20 years from now. I have young kids at home. My young kids are facing a very different planet than the one that I was raised on. And I think there's a lot of parents out there who want to ensure and want to help to make sure that the world is going to provide for their kids and not be a chaotic jumble. Because when ecosystems break down, food breaks down, water isn't available. It has huge implications on human welfare. And so there's incredible urgency to do the things right now that can make the biggest difference and avoid those tipping points or those thresholds that send systems into realities that they probably can't back out of. There's a whole literature about this in the ecological world where you hit a threshold, you change the system so much that it hits a threshold, there's no going back. We have the ability and the power to not have that happen. But you're right, you're absolutely right that on the direction of travel is definitely headed there now.
I mean, maybe you explain this to most people because I don't think people understand it. What is it? 75, almost 80% of the world's population lives within 5 miles of a coastline.
Yes, the vast majority of people are very close to shore. Yeah, I don't know if it's 5 miles or maybe it's 30 miles. I don't know exactly what the statistic is, but the vast majority of the world's population is close to the shore for sure. And close to the shore has implications for as the glaciers melt, right? People don't, I don't think I think that there's an abstraction in how people in my community and the environmental community have talked about climate change for a long time, because we talk about the melting of the polar ice cap. Well, I've actually never been to the polar ice cap, right? And I don't think most people have. But the
I
reason
have.
it matters, you have? Okay, well, next time you can take me with you. Yeah. Um, the reason it matters is because that's water, right? When it melts, it has to go somewhere. And where does it go? Water flows downhill until it gets to the ocean. That's the way it works. And so when something melts, it flows into the ocean and then the ocean comes up. And that's why there's so much talk about rising seas. And in a place like Miami or Louisiana or even parts of Maryland
Maryland.
where I live. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like,
Maryland.
yeah, it's the flooding is already happening. And so and it's only going to get worse. And what happens to those homes and those communities as it gets worse and worse? Um,
What's the bright light you see in the future? Give me something that's bright.
well, I think the bright light is that they're in those two areas where we could make a real difference today, there's incredible progress. And I don't think those stories get told enough. So on reducing methane emissions, there's incredible progress. There's still a ton to be done. I don't want to sound like it's all tied up, because it's a far way from that. But there's real progress, particularly in Europe and Japan, to create a standard that will enable energy to be used and developed that reduces methane emissions, which is really fundamental to the health of the planet. And the second is, in this bracelet that I'm wearing, I can show you, this bracelet here is from Kaiapó territory in Brazil, where I visited and slept in a tent in the rainforest in June. The protection of the Amazon rainforest is a real success story. The Kaiapó people, this indigenous people, these people, they manage their territory, which is an intact forest, no development, that is the size of England. It is a huge climate action that this indigenous peoples are taking. And there's more stories like that playing out in the Amazon every day. And we don't hold them up like the heroes that they are. And we need to see more of that and provide more opportunity for more of those communities to be able to protect their lands and the wildlife and the people that live in it.
Yeah, this has been such a great conversation, Amanda. Before we go, maybe you can tell me one thing. What would you ask our listeners to do to support sustainable seafood and ocean conservation?
Yeah, on the ocean front, go to your local fishmonger, buy American fish. That's really, it's almost that easy right now, and I'm proud of that. So support the local American fishermen and buy local, delicious, fresh, local American seafood.
And last thought on that, is there a difference between farm raised and ocean or wild caught?
There are differences. It's hard. It depends. This is where it gets a little more tricky. There are really good farm raised fish and seafood and seaweeds. Like seaweeds are awesome. Oysters are awesome. Mussels, those are great. From the U.S., there isn't really yet a mature finfish aquaculture industry in the United States yet. But there is one coming, which we support, as long as it's done well and it doesn't create pollution that will harm the wild fisheries, which there's real potential there. So that's the next book. We can call that the book after sea change, is how aquaculture became part of the solution set in a big way. And we'll have even more options to feed even more people.
Great. Well, look, Sea Change is a must-read book, and I encourage anyone out there to go up online, Barnes & Noble, any place you can get a book and get a copy of it. Amanda, I got to say thank you so much for being a part of the show today. It's been inspiring, and when that next book does come out, come on back. We'd like to have you back again, okay?
Thank you so much, Montel, for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for tuning in to this edition of Free Thinking with Montel. Thanks for joining me on Free Thinking with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear feedback, so please send us your comments. Military Makeover is so grateful for the support of Purple Heart Homes, a nonprofit organization that rebuilds and transforms the homes for our veterans.
Our heroes come home with sacrifices most of us can't imagine. As a veteran myself, I've been there and founded Purple Heart Homes to help.
When I tell the story of Purple Heart Homes, it's the freedom to not have to depend on somebody else to do the simple everyday things in life.
Visit phhusa.org/makeover to learn how you can help.